Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, June 2nd, 2025. We're into the sixth month of the year here. I guess it brings us near halfway through the first year of the Trump presidency. I know it's going on forever, and it feels like we're dragging forever, but it's good to mark these milestones if they are milestones. No particular importance attached to it. It's not a 100-day thing so that there won't be newspaper write-ups about it or anything. But, well, there you go. We're halfway to a quarter of the way there. All right. Well, these are the things we have to cling to. All right. So another week begins, and it's another month begins, and let's see, the countdown to the great big beautiful bill now begins. There are interesting headlines among the many here today. I didn't grab it offhand now that I think about it, but I saw it floating around that, even the New York Times basically doing their fact check reporting about the claims made in the last couple of days about the big beautiful bill and what it will do and what it won't do and how it's being sold by top administration officials and allies. Which is to say, with lies. Although, it's a New York Times, so they say falsehoods. Trump and allies sell domestic policy bill with falsehoods. Which, I think you knew. But congratulations if you did. And if you didn't, I think you suspected it, certainly. And, a nice compilation of video clips of Donald Trump himself. Caroline Leavitt. Speaking for the White House, Caroline Leavitt, and Johnson, too, Speaker Johnson as well, chiming in, and all, along with others who made the Sunday show rounds, insisting, oh, no, this bill will cut trillions of dollars from the federal debt, and no one will lose their coverage on Medicaid. In fact, all we do is look out for waste, fraud, and abuse. No one loses coverage. But it somehow saves $600 billion over 10 years. And, of course, then if the estimates of people who actually do this stuff for a living saying about 10 to 13 million people who have coverage under Medicaid now won't have coverage under Medicaid later. And it's not because there's any way that we could define what they've been doing as waste, fraud, or abuse. But what the hell? Anyway, it's the basic Trump approach to everything. Why don't we do what we want to do? And to the extent that people who either want to support the bill or want to be neutral on the bill want to report that it does bad things or are worried that it might do bad things, why don't we say, no, it doesn't, and tell them to go out and also tell other people, don't worry, it doesn't. But, of course, it does. It hasn't yet because it hasn't passed yet. But that just seems to be where we're headed, and everyone ought to get used to it. Greg Dworkin has compiled the news roundup for the day, and I believe that we have a related item on that front. And so let's pick ourselves a nice fanfare and play them in for today. Not bad. A little baseball theme. A little
understated.
Yes.
I like it. I like the understated. I think it's good.
Brass horn. It was sold as, but one horn. It's not a group of them.
Right.
Yeah, and so now it's time to charge. Yeah, hooray. We're very enthused about the home team. You had mentioned, I don't know whether this is where you want to start, but you mentioned that, or I guess playing off of what we were talking about, the people who are lying as vigorously as possible to try to sell this bill. And before we left last week, Jodi Ernst had taken a turn at it, and I guess, I don't know, maybe she felt like, well, I don't know if I want to lie just directly to everybody and say nobody gets hurt by this bill, but why don't we just say, what's the difference given that we're all going to die anyway? And that was a beautifully delivered reminder of our our human frailty, I think.
Right.
People really
In
liked
fact,
it.
Covey93 on Twitter reminds us, he says, one of my favorite Bible stories is the one where the leper came to Jesus asking for healing, and Jesus said, "What's the point? We're all going to die."
Right, exactly. I mean, it's easy for
And
him to
that's
say
that's
because,
specific because she's hiding behind her religion, which I'll get to.
yeah.
And look, this is New England. We like not to talk about
Ah.
religion if we can. We don't like to put it in your face. We don't like to shove atheism in your face either.
Oh, well, yeah.
Just leave it be. Except when they make it part of politics, you can't avoid it. So
That's
if you're
true.
going to discuss
You
it,
can
my
make
advice,
policy
pro
that
tip,
way.
just don't be a jerk about it.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
Joni Ernst was. Here's what she did. So she goes and makes that statement. People are telling her from her constituency in Iowa at a town meeting that people are going to die because of what you voted for.
Yeah.
And that's where she says, well, everybody's going to die for heaven's sake. Right.
Well,
But then
not for their
she
sake.
gets called on it and she gets pounded on it in the media. So here's what she does. She decides to put up her staff, her brain trust, they decide that they're going to put up a video explaining it all. And this is her walking through a cemetery.
Why?
Like we're all going to die. And
Really?
if you can play that, please.
Okay, that's an important part of it. It's not immediately obvious that she's walking through a cemetery, but I guess eventually you see, yeah, that's where she is. I don't, did she mention that? Hi, I'm coming to you live from a cemetery.
Let's hear the tape and see.
I'd love to. Come on, Blue Sky, wake up. Oh boy, it's going to take its time working this out for some reason. All right, well, we've got, you know what? Maybe I can play it on the desktop version. Oh no, here we go. Finally. All right, here we are. Is the sound on?
Hello, everyone.
There
I would
she
like
is.
to take this opportunity to sincerely apologize for a
that's
statement
nice.
that I made yesterday at my town hall. I was in the process of answering a question that had been
Semi-fundy voice.
asked by an audience
Oh, yeah,
member
you're right.
when a woman who was extremely distraught screamed out from the back corner of the auditorium, "People are going to die." And I made an incorrect assumption that everyone in the auditorium understood that, yes, we are all going to perish from this earth.
That was the mistake, I'm sure. Whoops. Oh, I went further back than I wanted to here. Where are we? I got to bump us back up.
I made an incorrect
Here we go. One more
assumption
time.
that everyone in the auditorium understood that, yes,
Well, that's
we are
true.
all going to perish from this earth.
She's reading from the Gettysburg Address.
So I apologize. And I'm really, really glad that I did not have to bring up the subject of the tooth fairy as well.
Oh, very nice.
But for those
Yeah,
that
great.
would like to see eternal and everlasting life, I encourage you to embrace my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate
So
that. Yeah.
she steps in it and then hides behind her religion as a shield, as if that's going to fix everything with the fundies in her semi-fundy voice.
Yes.
And no, I don't like to talk about religion, but God damn it, these people.
Well, God may damn it. We're not sure yet. That was very nice. And if you'd like some everlasting life, won't help you with the Medicaid thing. And by the way,
People screaming that they're going to die and worrying about it because we're all going to die. You people are dumping on my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and how dare you? And I'm
We're not
right,
gonna
and
die.
you should vote for me. I think the proper response to that is, okay, we're all going to die. You first.
Yeah, right. And of course, now that is part of their religious training. If they really, I don't know if she's a true believer per se, but there are certainly fundamentalists.
She knows it wins
who
votes in
say,
Iowa, so that's what she knows.
And there certainly are fundamentalists who say, well, I'm not afraid of that because I believe that I'll be, we're all going to die. Well, not really, because we're going to also have everlasting life afterwards. So I'm actually not too worried about that for some reason. And
just be honest about it.
yeah.
Say, I voted for this crappy bill because it's God's will.
Yeah,
Just
I mean,
say it.
they should just say it
right?
that way.
And then let people
I
vote
guess.
on whether or not that's what they wanted.
Right. Now, I'm no theologian, but by the way, I just want to remind her that there is another way for her to experience everlasting afterlife. And a lot of times the people who experience this alternative version are people who have, intentionally and callously caused the deaths of their fellow human beings on this mortal earth.
Right, so
But,
they're infamous
I don't
like
know.
Hitler, and you
Turn
never
a
forget them.
page, Joni. You'll find it elsewhere, and
Right.
and it's hot.
Now, the thing is that it's you and I discussing it on podcasts that nobody in Iowa pays attention to. But
right. Well,
this is
I'm
like
one person.
front page, big letter font stuff on the Des Moines Register. And
Yeah,
so
good.
it really is hitting her really big in Iowa. So the pundit roundup
That's nice.
starts off with the Des Moines Register post. The headline there is Joni Ernst posts sarcastic apology video following comments that we're all going to
That's not
die.
great.
Points. Senator Joni Ernst's response
Mm-hmm.
sparked controversy. Ernst now has
Not
posted
joy.
an apology video, apparently filmed in a cemetery, in which she sarcastically
Yeah, why?
reiterates her point. The senator's comment drew criticism from Democrats concerned about the potential impact of Medicaid cuts proposed in President Donald Trump's tax plan, refocusing on what this is about. And then, of course, because
Yes.
this is the playbook, she figured that hiding behind religion wasn't enough. So later in the day, quote, later in the day, she blamed hysteria that's out there coming from the left, end quote, for the response to her initial comments.
I see.
Because, and that's what they're doing in these town halls when they get blasted. I didn't read the bill. The part that's in it you don't like is being hysterically distorted by leftists.
Yeah. And also
It's in the plain language. Ask Antonin Scalia. Just read the text. Well, I didn't read it. Well, then you don't
very
know.
Long. That's true. Now, you should not be daunted from don't be turned away from reading such a long text. I know it'll take an awful long time, but remember, you have everlasting life. So there's really no worries.
Right.
You've got the time.
There was no need to vote on the bill that night.
Right. That's true too. It's after all.
You could have waited a week and had your staff read it since you can't read. All of this is possible. You didn't do it. So no, I mean, she's in trouble. And it's really a tone deaf kind of response.
Yeah.
In regard to the town meeting, her doubling down on stepping in it. It's just awful. All of it is awful.
I've not been. Yeah, it's unclear to me though why. Well, don't worry about that because once you die, you will have everlasting life. But in the meantime, I'm very worried about the debt and the deficit. Well, why? What's the worry? Well, we're passing it on to our grandchildren. Well, after all, they're all going to die and then eventually be in everlasting life anyway. So they'll say, yeah, debt. What's the big deal? I don't know. Why doesn't that work for debt? I'm
right.
not really sure.
Joni Ernst generally runs, and this is a September 2024 poll. Joni Ernst generally runs about 47-41 in terms of approval. She's not invulnerable.
Okay.
So she's up for re-election in 2026, which is, I think, why she felt like she was obligated to do something about it with that video. That's not going to make the controversy go away. It's just going to make it blow up.
Yeah.
Which
also,
the Des Moines Register was clued into, and that's how come it was like the front page stuff.
Why are we worried about, so very worried among Republicans about supposedly dead people voting, given that, they're in an everlasting life later on? I don't understand why. Who would you want?
Opinion, she would have been much better off by just leaving it alone. And just to give you an idea, in terms of the approval ratings, in 2019, Joni Ernst was at 57. Now she's at 47.
Well,
Chuck Grassley in 2005 was at 76. He's now at 48.
Right. Oh, by the way, about that everybody's going to die eventually thing. And Chuck Grassley, I just was wondering whether he knew about that.
Yeah.
Because it looks like he doesn't. And just intends to keep serving in the United States Senate, though as I understand it, everyone dies.
Well, Strom Thurmond doesn't.
Yeah. He didn't understand it for a while, but maybe this is what does it. I don't know. He picks up the paper and reads what Joni Ernst said, and in shock and dismay. Oh my God, what? Maybe that'll be it. I don't know. Well, they got a race on their hands, and good. It should be a toss-up there, and she should be tossed out as a result. Filming in a cemetery, that's just not nice generally. Right. I mean, unless you're going to be firing, 21-gun salutes. Let's leave the cameras at home.
So the meme, and by the way, Caroline Leavitt is variously known by titles, Baghdad Bell, or now she's known as Taco Bell.
Taco Bell. Yeah, I saw a nice cartoon over that way, and a big taco-themed dress.
Dressed in a taco dress. Yeah. So this is the Atlantic. The title of this piece is called "The Taco Presidency." Oh. The point I'm trying to make here is that sticks.
Yeah. Well, it's catchy, fun.
It's not only catchy, it's true.
Oh, yes. Right.
And so, and he hates it, and it sticks. And he lets it be known that he hates it, and that makes it stick even more. Wall Street seems to have finally figured out Donald Trump, says the piece, and it may be too late. It's by David Graham, centrist. One way to trace the past 9 years of Trump is the journey from taco bowls to taco bulls. Hey, don't click away. This is going somewhere. Stick with it. Wait for it. Back in May 2016, the then GOP president posted a picture of himself eating a Trump Tower Tex-Mex entree. I love Hispanics, he wrote. Everybody stood, this is an awkward pander. And now, in May 2025, Wall Street is all over taco trade. Yeah. Another instance of people realizing they shouldn't take the president at face value. Taco is short for Trump always chickens out. Markets have tended to go down when Trump announces new tariffs. Investors have recognized a lot of that's bluffing, so they're buying the dip and profiting off the rally. And the rally, of course, is inevitable because he brings it back. A reporter asked Trump about the expression, and he was furious. I chicken out? I've never heard that, he said. Don't ever say what you said. That's a nasty question. To me, that's the nastiest question.
Not to you.
The reaction demonstrates, of course, that the traders are right, because the mixological metaphor is a hit dog will holler. The White House keeps talking tough about levying new tariffs on friends and geopolitical rivals alike, but Trump has frequently gone on to lower the measures or delay them for weeks or months. Hit dog will holler. I bring you back to Jodi Ernst. If it didn't bother her, she wouldn't have done that stupid cemetery follow-up video.
Yeah.
Hit dogs really do holler. She got hurt by that, and she knows it.
Good. Hit again.
Foreign leaders had figured out that, and by the way, don't really hit your dog. It's a metaphor.
Yeah. They'll tell you.
Like dogs. Abby likes dogs.
Yeah.
Foreign leaders, that's my dog. Foreign leaders had figured out that Trump was a pushover by May 2017, and a year later I laid out in detail his pattern of nearly always folding. So Graham has a track record of writing about this. Putin figured it out early on. Even though no president has been so purely a businessman as Trump, he and the markets had never really understood each other. That's partly because Trump just isn't that good at business.
Well, yeah.
But Wall Street's never seemed to have much better of a grasp on Trump than he has of them, despite having many years to crack the code. That's the part I can't figure it out. We figured it out. New Yorkers figured it out. Wall Street's in New York. What the hell's wrong with them?
Not sure.
This is worth recalling when market evangelists speak about the supposed omniscience of markets. Marcus, Sharpies. Markets.
Yeah.
Financiers have tried to understand Trump in black and white terms, but the task requires a nuanced recognition that he can be deadly serious about tariffs in the abstract and extremely prone to folding on specifics. You also have to really focus in on the fact, he doesn't say this, but I will. You will never understand Trump unless you understand he's a liar.
Yes.
He's nuts. He's stupid. He says things in the moment which he believes completely true for those 30 seconds, then forgets about it.
Yeah.
And so if you don't take all of that into account, you're not really going to understand what he's doing. This isn't a 3-dimensional, 90-dimensional chess or something.
Oh, no.
This is like I said it, and then I'll deny that I said it 5 seconds later to you in the same interview on tape.
No doubt about it. We've seen it. It is on tape, and we've watched it happen. And there's lots of other more ornate theories, but certainly the best one going is he just says whatever he thinks will help him escape the moment, and then sometimes will lock himself straight back in the box because the moment has passed and he hasn't left.
Right.
So
now, this next paragraph is like the key nugget of our 2025 politics. And for those of you who thought Biden should have stepped down earlier because he's too old, fine. And for those of you who felt like you couldn't vote for Kamala Harris for whatever reason, okay. But please understand that this is the substance of everything, this paragraph. Although they disdained him during his first term, many titans of industry sought accommodation with Trump during his 2024 campaign. And here's the key line, hoping he'd be friendlier to their interests than Joe Biden had been. Biden was no friend of Wall Street. Biden was no friend of billionaires. Billionaires are, as Mark Sumner put it on Daily Kos over the weekend, billionaires are taking everything you have, and you should be mad at them for it.
Yes, I think that's basically
Biden was standing between you and them. You chucked him out because you thought he was too old. And sure, he wasn't perfect. So what? Who is? That's not the point. The point is what he was doing was, for the most part, trying to make America better, trying to make your life better. And what Trump is trying to do is enrich himself, and the titans of industry figured that, less taxes on us, so therefore we could live with it. That's what motivates them. They won't be offended if you tell them that that's their major interest and they have no soul. They'll tell you, stockholders don't care about our soul, they care about returns. So that's what they were into. And I'm not saying that and there's two cores here. One of them is that that's the way the Wall Street market works. And the other is Joe Biden was fighting that on your behalf because Democrats fight for that on your behalf. And if you don't get that, then you're going to vote for Trump because he lies to you. And that's what happened. And I'm not saying that's how Biden/Harris, that's how Democrats lost.
Yeah. Ugh. Well, what can I tell you? That's the way Trump is, and I guess the one thing I don't want to explain it to Wall Street or billionaires in ways that they'll understand it. I prefer that they end up getting burned, but
they're transactional, so they're going to get burned. They're the vendors who work for Trump who don't get paid. I mean, it's all of a piece. How you didn't know that for 30 years? Where
it's everyone's favorite
folks
story.
In the Diamond District, everything's on a handshake and your reputation. Right? You don't put up the money for things that you make deals on. You shake hands on it, and then everybody figures you're good for it. You can't do that with Trump. Imagine.
No, I can't. Well, I don't know that anybody ever did. The only diamond purchase type stuff that I know about with Trump is like, I guess when Don Jr. needed an engagement ring, I guess that explains why he went to the Short Hills Mall in New Jersey to get the ring and to get a free one. Because, I mean, there's diamonds in New York all over the place. There's a whole district. He could have gone down there, and I guess no one was willing to cut this deal with him. But that was the one where he had to propose to his first wife in front of the store in the Short Hills Mall in order to get a free engagement ring, which, I mean, probably should have told you a little something about where is this marriage going? Well, it went right where you would have thought.
A slight segue, a slight down the path
Everything's
of a different route until we get back to it.
All right.
But let's talk. I'm not a lawyer.
All right, that's okay.
Let's talk a little bit about contract law.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Boy. All right. First year. Yes.
Concepts. Okay. Concept number one. If you're in the Diamond District and you're not signing the party of the first part shall be known as the party of the first part, sort of long 72-page piece of paper, but nonetheless you agree to something and you shake on it, that's a contract.
Yes. It's meant to be, right? This is an exchange of value and
on both sides
is made
agree to. It's a contract.
True.
And, you may win, you may lose, but you can sue in court over this because it's a contract.
Yes, it's not your best bet, but it's a real one, and you can absolutely win if everybody believes that it happened.
On the other hand,
well,
let's say there's witnesses. Let's say it was done, in front of a whole room full of people. You'll win.
Yes.
On the other hand,
they'll have huge hats, but yes.
On the other hand,
okay,
there's a whole piece in Twitter. Which actually I have on the pundit roundup at the very bottom, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. It's from Carrie Johnson, and she says this: Veteran lawyers have reached a curious conclusion about President Trump's deals with big law firms this year. They don't appear to be legally valid.
No.
Trump, since coming to office, has punished certain firms for their past clients or causes. The problem is they're not deals at all, said Harold Coe, a professor and former dean at Yale Law School. You know, a contract that you make with a gun to your head is not a contract.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that a contract, shake hands in the Diamond District. Not a contract, threaten somebody until they sign.
Right.
And again, how Wall Street did not know this. Everybody in New York knows this. About Trump.
Yeah. I don't know. Watch The Godfather. You'll figure it out. Right? Just sign the contract or okay.
It's supposed to be masters of the universe and titans of industry. It's supposed to know this stuff.
Yes, they are. And I'm not certain why they didn't, or it's also possible in some cases that they said, oh yeah, whatever, we'll sign this thing and get this guy with the gun out of the room. We know it's not an enforceable contract because we know we're under duress. So go ahead and do it. It could be that, but not everybody's trying to wiggle out of it either.
So David Graham goes on to say, this is where the taco trade comes in. Rather than panicking every twist and turn, investors have begun to grasp the pattern. But every Wall Street arbitrage eventually loses its power once people get hip to it. In this case, the fact that Trump's learned about the taco trade could be its downfall.
Yes.
He may be faint-hearted, but his track record shows he can be dared into taking bad options by reporters just asking him about them.
Yeah.
So, for example, Trump feels shamed into following through on an economically harmful tariff because reporters oppress him. Markets don't take him seriously. Turns out it's real. Not likely because there's no such thing as shame for Trump. So I don't buy the scenario. But I still don't understand why titans of industry and masters of the universe don't understand Trump the way New Yorkers do.
I don't know. Right? Yeah. If not, they're certainly connected to enough of them. It's a mystery.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Taco Monday. It's all taco week, I guess, now, as long as it's bothering. And I am seeing some very clever taco memes. Everyone's really having a good time. I saw one. I can't remember the name of this person, but you remember a couple of years ago during the height of the Black Lives Matter marches and demonstrations, the St. Louis incident, during which a few people passed through
with the lawyers with their guns on the lawn saying, "Get off my lawn."
So somebody has photoshopped Trump's face into the woman in that photo, holding out the pistol to say "taco" one more time. It's an interesting one.
Patricia and Mark McCloskey.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I was like, there's no way I'm going to remember their names, but okay.
I think he ran for office after that. I don't think he won.
I think that is correct. Yeah, there they are, right? The photo, and they're very unlikely looking gun wielders, and they're not real good at the wielding. But a gun is a gun, and you got to get out of the way.
Yeah.
But she's it's a hell of a thing. I'll put it in our roundup, and let me find a way to send it to you. So so that I can get it and you can see this picture. But in the meantime, we could move on to something else, and then you'll just
Well, there's
laugh
some
in
other
the
things
middle
here.
of it.
There's Kash Patel screwing up at the
yikes.
FBI. The headline in the New York Times: Unease at FBI intensifies as Patel ousts top officials. Senior executives are being pushed out, and then Director Kash Patel is more freely using polygraph tests to tamp down on news leaks about leadership decisions and behavior.
Yeah.
So he and Pete Hegseth are obsessed about bad press. And of course, you can argue about whether the FBI was effective or whether the FBI is good or bad. There's no question it's dumber and much more incompetent under the current cabinet members.
Yes.
I mean, RFK Jr. is clearly the worst, except for the others. He is an all-time terrible cabinet pick who's going to kill people.
We're all going to die.
You could argue Marco Rubio already has a better track record of killing people than RFK Jr. I'm just saying that RFK's competition for the worst possible cabinet pick happened to be all the other members of this cabinet.
Yeah. And at least it's a pleasure listening to him speak.
But in any case, before being confirmed as a director, Kash Patel made clear his intent to remake it in his own image.
Yeah.
He voted for him anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he told you what he was going to do.
So thoroughly compromised, it'll remain a threat to the people unless drastic measures are taken. He wrote in his book, which is called Government Gangsters. Taken together, the moves are causing worrisome upheaval at the FBI, eliciting fear and uncertainty as Mr. Patel and his deputy, Dan Bongino, who's in trouble with MAGA, by the way, because he can't find evidence for giant conspiracies.
Yeah.
Quickly restock senior ranks with agents and turn the
back.
agency's attention to immigration. I have to check this. I'm not sure it's in this article.
What's this?
But a lot of the people who were ousted or like at the Pentagon happen to be women.
Yes.
I haven't seen the specifics on it.
That's true. The Pentagon one. The article you were reading did mention that most of the people ousted at the top levels at the FBI are women too, and it's also has been the case. It's been reported, certainly. Yeah, the top brass targeted at the Pentagon, same thing.
Right.
So,
one FBI lawyer was removed from a key job overseeing human resources and notified while on medical leave. Others have been forced out of jobs with no explanation. A succession of top agents, all women, were given an ultimatum: take a different post or retire.
Yeah.
So
that's nice.
Again, he's elevating assistant special agents in charge to the top spot at field offices without going to be section chiefs first.
Yeah, that's not done usually.
It's a bad situation. Meanwhile, the thugs at Homeland Security handcuffed one of Representative Nadler's aides while they were trying to search his office for reasons which are totally unclear, without a warrant, because there was a protest going on the floor below.
Yes. I don't know what drove them to think that this was the case, but the claim was, we think the protest that's going on the floor below is a riot, and two, we think that the rioters who left the scene are hiding in your office. We don't think you are that person.
The staff member was not arrested and not charged with any crime.
Right. Just handcuffed in front of everybody.
Just handcuffed. And the staffer said everything resolved and I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah. I assume he's trying to sort this out and get justice and something. But yeah, it makes for tepid and unsatisfying
This article
response.
in the Optimist says Nadler staffer did invite advocates inside.
Okay.
But
but that's all right.
He's allowed to talk to his constituency.
Sure. Right. And of course, you can't just, and you can't burst into the office, and supposing some of the people are in there. Yeah. Well, you're going to have to negotiate their way out of there, not arrest the congressional staff.
Right.
And
so
not arrested.
The staffer said these are constituents here for a meeting. The constituents identify themselves as immigrant rights advocates monitoring activities in the building. The video doesn't capture any interaction between staff and DHS police before the staffer was handcuffed, but two advocates who were present described officers questioning people as they left immigration court and threatening advocates as they intervened. Both people asked Gothamists not to use their names, saying they fear retaliation by the federal government.
Well, yes, that's not a good situation all by itself.
Right. So, I mean, the whole thing is bad, and they're a bunch of thugs. At least they weren't wearing masks.
Yeah, I mean, that's something. It's usually they are.
If that's
doing
the
that.
bar that you have to decide something is okay, that's bad.
No. Yeah, they're really enjoying their military toys, the surplus things that they got. Everybody's coming to these events dressed not even for a riot, but for a battlefield, and body armor and helmets, and goggles and headsets and AR-15s certainly, and then sometimes adding a mask in there as well. And the overwhelming response to something that there's no threat of breach of the peace at all. But cops have been responding in riot gear for a long time, but riot gear has now become battleground gear, and it looks really weird to have these guys all over America's streets, and in the name of freedom, military occupation of centers, cities, else, and not even always urban context either. This has been turning up in rural Vermont. They're conducting ICE raids at farms and farmers markets and farm stands, restaurants, etc., and handcuffing working moms and dads and taking them away, but showing up as SWAT teams to do it. I don't know, but I guess mark down for the record who was president when we finally lost Red Dawn. It was Donald Trump.
Now, this is from the New York Times, different issue.
Okay.
Trump to withdraw Musk's ally as nominee for the top NASA job. And before we go into the specifics, there's a lot of talk about Musk is on the outs in D.C.
Yes.
He is. I mean, it's not just talk. Musk is bad-mouthing Trump's big, beautiful bill. Musk is not being, he's still got Doge there. He's still got the data that he collected. He's doing a lot of bad things.
Yeah, I'm not sure what.
He's still angling to try to get contracts based on his relationship with the government. All of that is still true. The Saudi Arabia, where was it, UAE trip, wherever he was, that he was trying to get people to, buy his XAI product we talked about on the show last week.
And
he was still working with Trump at the time, so that's sort of an old story compared to this. But the title is "With Trump to Withdraw Musk's Ally as Nominee for Top NASA Job." And Trump's excuse for that is that the guy once voted for a Democrat, or he donated
so
to
you
prominent Democrats. Therefore, you can't have it because everything's about loyalty.
Right. You can't get into space.
But if Musk had clout, he would have been pushed.
Had clout or cloud?
If Musk had clout, then this guy would still be in the running to be the director.
Yeah,
he doesn't.
Guess.
No juice. He's out.
Yeah. Well, the story at the end of the week was his term as special government employee was over, so he was leaving Doge. But then the weekend was also full of opinion pieces saying you shouldn't believe that this is the end of his influence.
That's exactly why I'm bringing this up. This is the end of his influence.
Oh, all right. Well, good.
Right? Because he couldn't get his.
It wasn't going to happen.
SpaceX has contracts with NASA. He couldn't get his guy to run NASA. That's losing influence.
Yeah, and I guess money as well. I don't know where they turn, but yeah, you would have thought that was a lock, right? Like, just if you were guessing at the beginning of the term, where will he have the biggest influence?
He's going to put all his people in various places so he can make more money. He's losing influence. His guy got canned. All right. So those opinions are correct in the details that they sort of leading. Well, it's not over. He's still got access. His people are there. They still have the data. All of that's true. You can reverse something Trump did and the damage is already done. This is one of those cases.
True.
But, he's not what he was in that. And at the same time, the Trump administration is leaking all sorts of stories. I think we covered one of them on Thursday from the Wall Street Journal about Musk's drug use, et cetera, et cetera. The New York Times had a follow-up story on that in which Musk said, the New York Times story and all those others, they're all lies. They accuse me of using drugs. My ketamine is on prescription.
Yeah. Well, that's drug,
that's using
right?
drugs, buddy.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but I used ketamine because my head was in a dark place. Two things to say about that. So the guy also
I know
suffers
where it
from
was.
depression, among other things, which is not surprising among drug users, on the one hand.
Oh, true. Yeah.
And on the
Okay.
other hand, notice the language. We always talk about Democrats talking elite stuff.
Hmm.
He doesn't say, I took ketamine for depression. He doesn't use the word depression.
Hmm.
He doesn't define depression in terms of depression means.
Yeah.
He said,
I don't have that.
my head was in a dark place. He
A smelly
speaks
place.
the language, the term. He explains it without using the word, so he doesn't sound all highfalutin.
I guess, right, or weak, or like he believes in psychotherapy or something crazy.
He doesn't.
Leftist
I mean,
like
he
that.
absolutely doesn't believe it. But the point is, he's using language that his followers understand.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's language that they might understand. He's
But,
never going to successfully
saying
get
that
to
you
Mars.
took ketamine because it was prescription, so it took it. My heroin was by prescription, so I'm not a drug user.
Sure. Yeah. What does it say on there? It says don't operate heavy machinery, right? Here's a chainsaw. Durr. Okay.
Yeah, it says right there at the bottom, do not give interviews to the New York Times
Right.
while on ketamine.
Do not attempt to restructure the federal government. That's heavy machinery. Yeah. Look, it was a prescription. That just means I won't arrest you for it. Does it mean your head was on straight? No, it means the opposite.
It means you were taking drugs.
So one, that wasn't going to leave your head on straight. Two, you just told us the reason you started taking the drugs was because your head wasn't on straight. That didn't straighten your head. It made it worse. But, okay, but you had a piece of paper. Oh, yeah, really? Wow, that's interesting. By the way, I've seen the doctors you guys occasionally use for things like this. Yeah. We've been seeing this for a long time with Trump too. And please tell me
your drunk doctor says you're not on drugs.
Yeah, right. Please tell me your prescription is from Ronnie Jackson. Can't wait to find that out. I'm sure he could buy his own, but
This is a follow up to some of our discussion from before. New York Times. Trump's, and these are all from the Final Roundup. Trump's top economic officials insist that tariffs will remain even after court ruling. Remember that international U.S. Court of International whatever
trade,
not the U.S. International Court. It's the U.S. Court of International Trade.
Right.
They signaled that Trump had no plans to extend an original 90-day pause.
Oh, okay.
And they insist that the tariffs are real and Trump's going to do it. So have a taco, Mr. President.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that seems like that was the best possible spin to come out of this. Well, we're going without saying.
No, this time we mean it.
We're going to defy the courts. They want to hint that that's the case, but they're in fact, they're in compliance with the end result that the court needs to see. They're just claiming that they're doing that for a different reason. There was a stay
at the appellate level.
Yeah, there is that, and so they could be in compliance with the courts at large at the moment.
They have until the court case goes through. And even in those situations where the Supreme Court has ruled against, for example, immigrants with legal status who now do not have legal status, that case has not been settled.
Right.
And we don't know for sure what the Supreme Court is going to do. We could guess because they're a bunch of corrupt jerks, but we don't know yet.
Yeah. We have to wait to the end, and then maybe the end isn't the end, and there are all sorts of that's.
I know what the end is. The end is we're all going to die.
Right. Oh yeah. Right. That's it. Right. Exactly. So we cleared the Supreme Court docket. Time for
what difference does it make whether they have legal status or not? We're all going to die.
I don't know. Yeah. In fact, you've seen a couple of us do it already. So yeah, maybe we'll all go hunting and die.
Right. This is Joe Lawrence writing in the Bulwark. David Jolly's purple campaign for Florida governor. That's just an interesting situation. Jolly became a very articulate never-Trumper, Liz Cheney style. People on the progressive left and left, center left, like me, saw that. Some of us said, okay, fine, big tent, whatever. I'm glad that you saw the light. We forgive you for the purpose of you voting for us. But
not us voting
the Florida
for you.
GOP is so weak and so badly run. He's probably the best candidate for governor that they could offer, and you don't have to like him.
I won't.
It's who's going to run to replace Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, good. And not his wife.
Hmm. So in Jill Lawrence's story, are Sunshine State voters ready for a reality-based candidacy? I would guess not, because they all moved there from Ohio. I'm coming into the Democratic Party right now because I believe it's in its strength, Jolly told me, Jill Lawrence, Wednesday on the phone. Republicans, he said, have failed to provide an economy for all people to ensure government is delivering services to those who need them. Well, Joni Ernst says they're all going to die anyway, so
you
why
don't need
bother?
them.
And to lift up and embrace the diversity of our communities and culture. He said those fundamental democratic values and the reasons he is excited to officially join the party, we get to accept science and math and public health. It's pretty incredible, right? He's pretty good at distilling a good message there. And we talk about message a lot on the show because I like to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I like to talk, so we wind up covering message quite a bit. But again, you're distilling things to the point where people can understand what he's saying.
Okay.
He doesn't sound elitist at all.
That's true. That's good. That's nice. I got my worries. Florida, weird place. Not a great track record lately of Republicans seeing the light, switching to become Democrats and standing for governor. But I mean, one time in a row it didn't work. We got that.
Yeah, but didn't it work once?
Two. Did it? I don't know.
Didn't Chris win once?
Once. Yeah. All right. So I think he's like 1 for 1 on that. One and then he didn't. Oh, maybe. Okay. Yeah. So it's not a huge winner. So I guess he shoehorned himself in there in between, like what, Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis
or something like that. I think he was a Republican still and then became a Democrat. I don't know. I can't
I'll
even keep track of Charlie Crist. It changes every week.
Right.
You know. He's got the track record of a Van Drew. I don't know what party he is. What day is it?
Right. All right. Well, yeah, I know he made a big
the
switch,
point is,
and he didn't
they
hang
need a
on.
Clayton Anderson from North Carolina or a Ben Wickler from Wisconsin move down to Florida and just run the party because the party is just so weak and so.
The Florida Republican one, though, they are the majority and they run everything. They just run everything very, very badly, and it should be ripe.
Democrats ought to be able to take advantage of that, but apparently they can't.
Oh. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. I'm looking at his electoral record, and I guess
Charlie's.
Yeah.
Or Christ's.
Christ's, and I guess he didn't do that well. But I guess he did do a stint in the House later on.
As a Democrat, right?
Yeah, and he and there too shoehorned himself in and to no great effect. Preceded in the job, interestingly enough, by, well, I guess if you had to pick somebody out of this whole mess, David Jolly. So he beat David Jolly.
Who was a Republican at the time.
Yeah. So, I mean, well, where did David Jolly get this idea that he could switch parties and run for office successfully? Oh, from the guy who did it to him? Oh, all right. But how successful was it? By August 31st, he was out and Anna Paulina Luna was succeeding him. So, volatile seat there.
Nature abhors a vacuum. And if you don't have any candidates, Jolly's going to be the strongest candidate you can offer.
I guess so. But yeah, boy, the 13th is just putting up all the winners. David Jolly, Charlie Crist, Anna Paulina Luna. That is some lineup. Where is that? I'll have to look that up. And everybody should move out of there.
It's in Florida.
Yeah. Western Florida. Tampa area, but further west than Tampa. I guess you can't call anything in that area a suburb anymore, but I don't know. Tarpon Springs down to St. Petersburg. Got it?
Got it.
All right. Well,
Tampa, St. Pete.
Leave the area if you can.
So here's from the Bulwark, Jonathan Cohn. RFK Jr. may have just ruined our best weapon against bird flu. I don't like RFK Jr. I don't know if you figured that out. He just made two bad decisions on vaccines, and he made them in the worst way possible. Moderna was trying to use its know-how, that's to say mRNA vaccines, from COVID to invent a vaccine platform it could deploy rapidly against several types of influenza, including H5N1 bird flu. A version of which, if you haven't heard, is spread to the U.S. and is ravaging poultry farms. And if you haven't heard, when humans get it, it kills you.
Oh.
mortality rates reaching 50% in isolated outbreaks.
Wow.
That dwarfs the
What?
comparable
I didn't hear
figure
that.
for COVID-19, which in most countries
Yeah.
is in the low single digits and still killed more than 7 million people, including more than 1 million in the United States under Trump. That death toll would have been, I added the under Trump because it was under Trump. That death toll would have been even higher if not for speedy development of COVID vaccines, which was also under Trump.
Yeah, I mean,
including Moderna's, whose
did do
secret
that.
sauce is mRNA technology. That's why two of the scientists won the Nobel Prize in medicine, and it's why that bird flu contract went to Moderna, and that's the one that was canceled by RFK Jr.
But I don't think there's a
Who's an
vaccine.
ignorant POS, by the way.
Yeah. Sounds healthy though, and well tanned. So there you go. Yeah, he seems to hate that and is going to stand in the way of progress there and everywhere, and with development of all sorts of vaccines, standing in the way of progress on HIV vaccines, bird flu, now fighting with the CDC over whether or not they're going to tell people who are under 65 it's okay to get a COVID booster. He says no, and the CDC shouldn't say so, and the CDC is saying, I don't know, I guess if you guys know HTML, you can come and take it off of our website, but that's what we're putting there. They're having a nice fight.
Oh, and I should, my last piece here.
This should not be
my last piece. Maybe I won't even do this one.
Yeah.
But this is interesting.
Okay.
You've all heard that Andrew Cuomo is a lock.
Oh, they should be locked up? Yes.
To be the next mayor. But City Council Speaker Adrian Adams is actually starting to gain on Cuomo in polls. Democrats prefer Adrian Adams to Cuomo in general election, new poll shows.
Okay. Are there Democrats there?
The Democratic primary endorsement hasn't come yet from the Working Families Party, who commissioned the poll. Zohran Mamdani is doing okay.
Really?
This particular Adams, Adrian Adams, Mayor Adams, is going to run as an independent.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course.
So,
I mean, I guess no party would have him.
Right. So Groucho Marx likes him.
Right. Well, look, I don't know. I don't understand.
So Eric Adams is the current mayor of New York.
Yeah.
He's a Democrat who's going to run as an independent because people hate him now, because he's MAGA, and he was indicted and MAGA got rid of it, so he would endorse things that MAGA does. And so this different Adams, Adrian Adams, Mamdani, and Andrew Cuomo are going to be in the Democratic primary, and we'll have to see what happens.
When does
Most
that take
polls
place?
show Cuomo with a major lead, but a survey of likely Democratic primary voters conducted last month found them choosing the relatively low-profile New York City Council Speaker over the former governor, 41 to 34. That is the first poll I've seen where Cuomo doesn't run away with it. So whether that's true or not true, good poll, not good poll, I think the fact that Cuomo's not running away with it is the message, not necessarily who's in the lead. But that gives us hope, because Cuomo's terrible.
Yeah.
Talk about not being able to push good candidates, field good candidates, I should say. New York is right up there with Florida.
Yeah, really. I mean, everything. But the mayoral race has just been like notoriously bad in making their choices. So what? June 24th is what used to be election day, I guess, for the primary. That's fine. I was not clear on this, and the action is so thick and heavy that I keep thinking that the primary must be within the week, but no, good. So there's still time to try and dislodge him. But I mean, I guess it's just tradition and name recognition. But I mean, it seems weird to me. There's a very large newspaper circulation there in New York, and not everybody reads the New York Times, but I'm pretty sure every one of those newspapers said, oh yeah, Andrew Cuomo, he's actually quite bad. He's quite a sleazy character. And you should remember that. Oh, why does that name ring a bell? I don't know. I guess I'll just check that box. And they have to do ranked voting too, right? Don't they? And it's like, so they're going to be presented with a whole slate of choices, and they don't even have to just choose one. All they can do is just stay away from him, and they're still not doing it. I cannot really explain
Since
that.
I mentioned RFK Jr.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have a new NIH director,
Do we?
who is Jay Bhattacharya.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Been all over the
Our
news.
article about him.
Yeah.
Important context, out of his depth, sold his soul, clueless.
Oh,
NIH staffers speak out about the director.
cool.
So, if you
Yeah.
were hoping the U.S. would promote good health, good luck.
I guess not. And by the way, yes, we're all going to die. But if you've sold your soul, you're really in for it in the eternity game. Holy mackerel. You're really going to be upset with yourself. He's got to talk to Jodi Ernst about
edit
that.
to USAID and other agencies that Trump has ruined. One that he's trying to ruin but hasn't been ruined yet is CDC. RFK Jr. said we're not going to endorse vaccines, COVID vaccines for healthy children and pregnant women.
Right.
And CDC said, yeah, we are.
Yeah, I'm kind of enjoying
and that's
that.
important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, that they're fighting back. They're standing up to the garbage. But at the same time, their words carry weight with insurance companies who have to pay for these vaccines.
Yeah.
So it's really important that they said that for both the reasons of standing up to the bully, but also to make sure that people can actually afford these vaccines.
Yeah, hopefully they'll continue to listen to them, and as opposed to saying, "Well, we think we can weasel out of paying."
I'm sure that the CDC director is about to be fired if they.
Oh yeah, no doubt about that. But that's
okay.
An interesting
do what you
thing
need to do.
They know
make it a Saturday night massacre. Make them all come.
Yeah. They know what's coming, and I think they're doing the exact right thing, and they're almost, I think, taking a page out of the Trump playbook. Like, I heard what you said, but this is what the website is going to say because I got the keys to the website. Now, you can fire me. You can come and take the keys. You could probably find a dodgy boy to reprogram this thing, but if you wanted to say that, you're going to have to come here and say it. You're going to have to make me do it because I ain't doing it. All right, that's, hey, it's understandable. I'm up for that. If you know you're going to get fired anyway, do it that way.
Well, on the one hand, I'm out of material, and on the other hand, I'm out of time, or vice versa.
And so, when you put it all together and shake, this is the explosive combination.
It's a
right, okay. And if you pour it into a test tube and wait for Wednesday, poof.
That's ridiculous. There ain't no Santa Claus. I will see you on Wednesday.
Okay, terrific. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Oh my, any number of places we could go in this one. We have to acknowledge at this point that we are working under another cloud. It's not a mass shooting cloud, but a mass type attack cloud. And so adding this one to the attack that killed the murder of 2 Israeli embassy workers in Washington, D.C. not long ago, that I don't know if we even we must have mentioned, at least in passing on the air, but it was a very murky situation right at the beginning when we mentioned it. But in the wake of that attack, there is now added an attack in Boulder, Colorado, which is a really bizarre one, just in terms of the method of attack employed. A man attacked a march for Israeli hostages in Colorado, and I'm reading a New York Times piece, so of course they're going to condescend to us with a "Here's what to know" headline. But in case that's not clear, people who are marching in support of and in a demand for the return of hostages still being held or still believed being held in Gaza, stemming from the original October 7th attack. And so someone else here, I guess, countering that demonstration, but with attempted murder. So, it's not a great situation. And I have seen it, like with the shootings of the embassy staffers, roundly condemned everywhere in all corners online, except for the weirdest and very prominent Palestinians themselves and Palestinian sympathetic protesters and or not even protesters, but people who certainly have that record, but coming out and saying, yeah, this not only solves nothing, actually quite bad for the cause you claim to be serving. And I think the attacker in the first incident was not themselves Palestinian anyway, so that kind of, even had they done something interesting and noble, probably would draw some criticism from actual Palestinians who might say, leave this to us, thank you very much. At any rate, 8 people hospitalized after a man, this is interesting, used a, quote, makeshift flamethrower on a gathering in Boulder, Colorado, honoring Israeli captives in Gaza. And I don't know if honoring was the word I would have chosen, but, calling for their return or perhaps memorializing those who had been declared dead already. The authorities are investigating it as an act of terrorism, which normally you would say, a makeshift flamethrower, sure. Especially against a political gathering of this sort. The first reports I think that I heard were from eyewitnesses who were pointing the attacker out to police and saying he's right over there and saying that he's throwing Molotov cocktails, which, I guess that's not exactly what ended up happening, but the effect is largely the same. So at any rate, Yan Zhuang and Matthew Mpoke Big, that's what it says. I think I've pronounced them the best I can. Reporting here for the New York Times, telling us what we need to know. Thank you very much. The authorities said they were investigating this attack in Boulder on Sunday as an act of terrorism after a man used a makeshift flamethrower to attack demonstrators marching peacefully in support of Israeli hostages in Gaza. So, a target of opportunity perhaps for this person. We'll see whether we can find out any more. But I guess, the practical difference between a makeshift flamethrower and throwing Molotov cocktails. Think about Molotov cocktails. They're flaming and you throw the thing. So, in one sense, but when we say flamethrower, I think we're thinking about a difference in scale. 8 people were hospitalized with burns and other injuries, and 2 of them were in serious condition, officials said. The suspect, who the Department of Homeland Security identified as an Egyptian citizen who had overstayed his tourist visa, was arrested. So naturally, Department of Homeland Security is going to say, well, first and foremost, let's talk about his immigration status. Let's talk about the fact that he had a flamethrower. The attack may intensify deep unease in the Jewish community in the United States. Yeah, likely. In recent months, 2 Israeli embassy aides were murdered in Washington, and a man set fire to the residence of Governor Josh Shapiro, I forgot about that one, of Pennsylvania, who is Jewish. I don't know whether they concluded there was any connection to that, but that's worth mentioning. Who was attacked? The injury victims, 4 men and 4 women who range in age from 52 to 88, obviously dangerous types, right, were participating in a weekly event called Run for Their Lives, which is held in cities around the world. It's designed to call attention to the hostages taken by Hamas militants in the October 7th, 2023 terrorist attacks in Israel. The police began to receive calls about an emergency at the Pearl Street Pedestrian Mall. At 1:26 p.m., Boulder's police chief Steve Redfern said at a news conference on Sunday evening, witnesses said a man threw an incendiary device into the crowd. According to the authorities, the man yelled, "Free Palestine," during the attack. According to Mark D. Mike McCallick, perhaps. Special agent in charge, by the way, of the FBI's Denver field office. The next question is whether that person came to that position through the normal route and the normal posting routes, or was boosted, leapfrogged up to the role by Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. Not sure. Anyway, video verified by the news agency Storyful, showed a man shirtless and holding 2 bottles, shouting while patches of grass burned in front of the county courthouse and bystanders helped injured people. So that it sounds for all the world like somebody throwing Molotov cocktails versus makeshift flamethrower, but okay. Lisa Efres, who was eating lunch nearby, said that she ran to the scene and saw smoke, people who were half-dressed and dazed and discarded clothes that had been used to extinguish flames. It was horrible, she said. The victims were hospitalized with injuries ranging from minor to serious. At least 2 were flown by helicopter to a burn unit in Denver. Who's the suspect? Identified as Mohammed Sabri Soliman of Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs is a bit of a hotbed, if you ask me. Mr. Soliman, 45, was taken into custody after witnesses pointed him out and was booked on multiple charges in the Boulder County Jail on Sunday. Spokesman for DHS said today, Monday, that Soliman was in the United States illegally. They worked overnight to try to find out if that was the case. Having entered in August of 2022 on a tourist visa from Egypt and stayed past the visa's expiration in February of 2023. It's quite a while. He filed for asylum in September of 2022, said the spokeswoman, Tricia McLaughlin, which is, I guess, to say, I assume that means his legal status was pending. So a little gray area about his legality. Mr. Solomon was booked on charges including first-degree murder. That'll damage your chances. And using explosives or an incendiary device while committing a felony. They do tend to go hand in hand. It was being held on $10 million bond. Charges did not necessarily equate to any that prosecutors may decide to file. Earlier, Michael Dougherty, the district attorney for Boulder County, said that the authorities would decide what charges to file against Mr. Solomon in the coming days. So, all right, I guess those charges, the former charges, are subject to change. What are authorities saying? The FBI was investigating the attack as an act of terrorism, Chief Redfern said, adding that the preliminary facts made it clear that this is a targeted act of violence. It seems like it would be. Late Sunday, the police and the FBI had cordoned off a residential block in Colorado Springs with patrol cars. They let a woman enter a home identified as the attackers. There was no immediate indication that Mr. Solomon was linked to any particular group or network. The Attorney General of Colorado, Phil Weiser, a Democrat, said in a statement that the attack appears to be a hate crime given the group that was targeted. So we'll see how officials responded. Well, probably pretty much as you expect. If you want, I don't know if you want to hear from Benjamin Netanyahu on this. I don't. So we'll probably skip that part. The mayor of Boulder had something to say. Sunday night, he said he was outraged and saddened by the attack. These were Jewish community members who were on a march for peace and for hostage return, and they were brutally attacked. It's disgusting and appalling. And I think you'll find largely most people actually agreed with that sentiment in public. Although, yes, there are certainly some weirdos who think it's wise to spend their time online making the situation worse. And, kudos to the more normal folks in the community saying, let's not encourage this kind of behavior, shall we? Thank you very much. All right. Other stories. I just want to make sure that that's on record. That's, important context for a lot of things that are going to happen over the next couple of days and weeks. And if there are, God forbid, but, I don't think that's going to work out. But God forbid there are other attacks in the coming days and weeks. You're going to need to know this as context for understanding those, I would think. Okay, let's see. A few other items to catch up on, including this news mentioned in passing by Greg in our discussions of what's happening in the courts. You all probably heard the news, and it registered with me heading into the weekend that this had happened, but not the full import of it until I got a note from one of our regular listeners, Bill Barr, who had shared with us, by the way, at some point, the story of a close family friend of his from Haiti who has been living and working and making a reasonable go of it at that, quite successful in conducting rebuilding their lives here in the United States after having to leave Haiti as refugees. But having legal status here to do so on an emergency basis, and the threat was that Donald Trump was going to revoke that legal status, and that could be, step one toward sending people back, though they had come here with legal status and permission and had built lives and were working and doing all the things that people who were embarrassed or used to be embarrassed before the second Trump administration to be called out as racists and xenophobes if they admitted to the fact that they didn't really care whether people were in fact working and contributing to society. They just didn't like the way they looked or what country they came from. But now that's apparently okay, and the Supreme Court, unfortunately, is rewarding them for it. But yeah, we ought to go over the news that the Supreme Court allows Trump now to revoke temporary legal status for 500,000 immigrants from 4 particular countries: Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. The United States taking care of its own among its American neighbors and partners. It's kind of always been a tradition. But, for some reason, Donald Trump will be allowed to break with that tradition. A federal judge had blocked the administration from immediately ending temporary status granted by the Biden administration to people from these 4 countries. And now the Supreme Court is intervening. But I want to read this because it's unclear exactly what stage of this proceeding we're really in here. Lawrence Hurley wrote this up for NBC News. The Supreme Court on Friday allowed the Trump administration to revoke the temporary legal status of more than 500,000 immigrants that was granted by the Biden administration, making them subject to deportation now. The court granted an emergency application filed by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, which is just insulting to my intelligence to hear that the Supreme Court is validating anything Kristi Noem is advocating, because that's just too irritating. I can't believe that they're allowing her to have a solid legal argument and be declared right. And she's not, but they're declaring her that way anyway. So let's see. This emergency application from Noem ends the Biden program that gave 532,000 people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela permission to temporarily live and work in the United States. Here's permission. All right, they come and do it. Well, let's undo the permission. And now you're illegal because we pulled the rug out from under you. The people directly affected by Friday's order may still have other avenues available to stay in the country, and I hope that they can exercise them, such as by applying for asylum, with their lawyers saying thousands have already sought to do so. The brief order, which did not explain the court's reasoning, because why bother doing that, noted that liberal justices Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sonia Sotomayor dissented. But I did notice the reports last week noting that Justice Kagan did not join them in that for some reason. Jackson wrote that the court had failed to take into account the devastating consequences of allowing the government to precipitously upend the lives and livelihoods of nearly 500,000 non-citizens while their legal claims are pending. The administration was contesting a ruling by Massachusetts-based U.S. District Judge Indira Talwani, who said the administration could not sweep each person's status away without holding an individualized determination. That decision is now on hold while litigation continues. The Supreme Court has effectively, though, greenlit deportation orders for an estimated 500,000 people, the largest such delegalization in the modern era, said Karen Tumlin, a lawyer at Justice Action Center who represents affected immigrants. I cannot overstate how devastating this is. The Supreme Court has allowed the Trump administration to unleash widespread chaos, not just for our clients and class members, but for their families, their workplaces, and their communities, she added. And that's a good point too, right? If one of these folks works in your place of business or is running a business supplying your business or something like that, all of a sudden the rug is pulled out from underneath your feet as well, and you're in for some hard times, to say the least. But you remember that we read about the humanitarian parole program that I guess is what's being revoked here. How long ago? Mid-April. when Bill sent me the story of Junior Bernard, as his family friend, who, and the long history that he'd established, reestablishing himself and his family in the country, and just how ridiculous and unfair and capricious this action on the Trump administration's side really is, taking people who have done everything that was asked of them in exchange for the grant initially of emergency temporary protected status, and done all the things that everybody always says, or, up until now, everybody had always said they wanted immigrants to do. And of course, why wouldn't they take that opportunity? They came and asked for it and were granted it. So, chances are they're going to be working really hard to make good on their end of the bargain, not realizing, of course, that they were dealing with an administration that is temperamentally incapable of keeping up their end of any bargain. So that's the bad news here. Assistant Homeland Security Secretary Tricia McLaughlin, she really shows up in all the worst places, said in a statement that the decision was a victory for the American people. I don't think so, and I'm an American person, but what can I tell you? That corrected an error made by the Biden administration to allow poorly vetted aliens into the country. But, well, they've had a chance to vet themselves since and have acquitted themselves beautifully, except for the fact that they didn't actually have to acquit themselves of anything. But that's the turn of phrase. Starting in 2022, then Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas granted what was called parole for 2 years to people from the affected countries, in part to alleviate the surge arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border. We got to do something about the surge arriving at the border. All right, how about this? Let's sort things out a little bit and give people who we think will stand the best chance of actually establishing themselves as contributing members of society through and in a different way, and sort out the rest as best we can down at the border. How about if we just create chaos across the board? Well, that's the Trump way. So they went for that. The policy, known as the CHNV parole programs, allowed people to enter the country and stay if they passed a security check and had a sponsor in the United States who could provide housing. So just a moment here to back up a little bit. Tricia McLaughlin here, Assistant Homeland Security Secretary. Well, this is a victory for the American people because it corrects the error, which is allowing poorly vetted aliens into the country. Oh, you mean the aliens who had to pass the security check and have a sponsor in the United States? Everything you said you wanted? Yes, those, exactly. Similar parole programs have applied to people from certain other countries, including those fleeing violence in Ukraine and Afghanistan. Solicitor General D. John Sauer, and remember this is another one of Trump's personal attorneys turned U.S. officials, said in court papers that Talwani did not have the authority to rule on this issue, with Noem given authority to make her decision under the Federal Immigration and Nationality Act. The same law gave Mayorkas the discretion to allow the affected people to enter and stay in the country. The Department of Homeland Security said in October of 2024 that each person's parole would not be extended once their 2-year approval period expired. Noem's move to unwind the Biden action was challenged in court by individuals who would be affected, as well as the Haitian Bridge Alliance, an immigrant rights group. Did we hear about that when we were reading Junior's case to everybody? I'm not certain if that got mentioned. Haitian Bridge Alliance at the time. Their lawyers wrote in court papers that Talwani's decision did not prevent Noem from ending the program, only that the government could not immediately rescind the status of the people already enrolled via a single sweeping order. The dispute is one of dozens of cases in which the Trump administration has complained about lower court judges blocking its policies, even as President Donald Trump has sought to aggressively expand the power of the presidency without the authorization of Congress. And what's really at stake here, in this case, as it is in so many of them, is the question of whether or not it is okay to do this stuff wholesale or whether there needs to be individual, particularized review of every case. And, well, it's always the Trump administration's contention that you can just do things like this across the board. It usually leads to bad results, but they don't care about that. Whereas the people often filing suit to stop it are saying, well, when you do these things across the board and you end up with such bad results almost across the board, this is a problem of administrative procedure in this country. You are saying that immigration status is revoked arbitrarily and capriciously based on nothing in particular and affording no particular benefit to the American people or territorial integrity. It just, you don't like a certain class of people and you want them out. That's pretty arbitrary and capricious. Show us that you're not going to be putting these people in harm's way. Show us that there's a material benefit to the United States. No, if we have to do that all the time, that's going to take too long. That's the basic Trump administration position. And they somehow keep squeaking by with it. The dispute is one of dozens of cases in which the Trump administration has complained, as about lower court judges blocking its policies. In a separate case, the Supreme Court on May 19th allowed the administration to revoke temporary protected status for a group of almost 350,000 Venezuelans. So they are managing to convince the Supreme Court that this is something they can do, at least with temporary protected status, folks, to deal with them in wholesale fashion. We'll see whether it holds up. I'm not entirely certain what stage of the game, what stage of the case we're in with the Supreme Court. And the fact that they moved so quickly on these emergency stays makes me wonder whether there isn't further substantive proceedings in these cases. But it's not entirely clear, and so the reporters are unable to make it entirely clear to us. So perhaps people closer to the situation know better and with more particularity whether they'll continue to fight on this one. Something else that I didn't get to last week, but it was of some interest. I picked up this piece from The Hill right at the end of the week, the 29th. That's Friday, I think. Rebecca Beach putting this out. DOJ, Department of Justice, allegedly the Department of Justice, cutting American Bar Association access to judicial nominees. There's been a lot of action with the American Bar Association and the DOJ lately, and I'm not certain whether this is over yet, but the American Bar Association, let's look this up, was recently conducting its elections in Washington for the national organization, I think, or was it just the D.C. Bar? Might have just been the D.C. Bar. But I'll have to look it up that way. D.C. Bar Association, and that's not an association of all the bars, by the way. But they were having an election for their new leadership, and running for the presidency of the DC Bar Association was, if I recall correctly, Pam Bondi's brother. Like, what? Okay, sure. And so he was running, to take control of the DC Bar Association. And I'm not certain how that went and when the end of the voting is on that. And I don't see anything showing up in the news scan about it either of late. Does it say in this piece when the end of the balloting is? I'm not certain. But at any rate, what was of interest there was some of the most potent weapons against Trump administration figures and certainly their lawyers when they were advocating for really crazy and arbitrary and capricious things. You could occasionally challenge their bar status and say you advocate this way and in such bad faith and ignore court orders, et cetera, you could be disbarred. But of course, it then occurred to Pam Bondi, I guess, have my brother run for the DC Bar Association. That's the bar that would be disbarring people for this kind of misconduct in Washington, D.C., where a lot of this legal activity is going on. And if Pam Bondi's brother was the person with the final say over whether or not somebody got disbarred in Washington, D.C., well, that would take away one of the major weapons, wouldn't it? Well, there's another weapon that they're going after, this one from the national organization, the American Bar Association. I'm not certain how they're going to pull this one off exactly, but the DOJ is said in the headline here, like I said, to be cutting off access to judicial nominees. So what does this mean? When the president nominates people to the federal bench, in addition to the public and members of the Senate sort of evaluating their fitness for the job, they very frequently turn to the American Bar Association. We don't know everybody. Tell us what you think of this person. What is their record as an attorney or perhaps as a judge if they've got one? And tell us whether they're recommended, whether they're acceptable for the job or are qualified, highly qualified, or even unqualified for the job. And guess what? They've been finding a lot of these Trump nominees unqualified, so guess what they're doing? Let's not have that happen anymore. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. We got another segment to fill here, and boy, have we got stuff to fill it with. So now a couple of choices we have to make. Let's first, though, finish up this piece from The Hill about what's going on between the DOJ and the American Bar Association. When I say, I left off right at the beginning of the break, well, let's not have that happen anymore. Let's stop having Trump administration nominees to the federal bench be found to be unqualified for the job. That could be taken any number of ways. In the traditional way is to think about the administration saying, let's be more careful with who we nominate, and let's nominate more highly qualified candidates and fewer unqualified candidates. What they mean, of course, is let's make it impossible for the American Bar Association to tell people the fact that they find these nominees to be unqualified for the job. Couldn't we do that? Wouldn't that be easier than finding qualified people? And for you, yeah, it probably would be. Attorney General Pam Bondi told the American Bar Association on Thursday of last week that the Trump administration would no longer cooperate as the organization vets its judicial nominees. I guess their power is somewhat limited, although I don't know why they recognize the limitations at all. Why don't they just say, if you don't stop saying people are unqualified, then we're going to deport every member of the Bar Association. It's ridiculous to say so, but yeah, he may very well go ahead and say so anyway. I don't know if it's really going to bother him any, but they're going with this limited opening salvo anyway. What does it mean to say that they will no longer cooperate as the ABA vets its judicial nominees? Well, in a letter, the Department of Justice accuses the Bar Association of failing to, quote, fix the bias in its rating process, a claim that follows the organization labeling some of President Trump's nominees as unqualified for the bench. oh, you say that they're unqualified, but that's because you're biased in favor of qualified people, I guess, presumably, and you should fix that. We need you to not be biased in favor of the qualified and against the unqualified. We prefer the opposite. So how about you do that? To which most organizations say, how about you go F yourself? I mean, that's the usual answer. Unfortunately, their letter continues, unfortunately, the ABA no longer functions as a fair arbiter of nominees' qualifications, they say. And its ratings invariably really, and demonstrably favor nominees put forth by Democratic administrations, Bondi wrote in the letter to the ABA president, William Bay. And of course, I'm sure you see it all coming and it makes sense to you. Yeah, I mean, I see why they think that they're biased towards Democratic nominees. Democratic presidents tend to care more than Trump that they nominate people who are actually qualified for the bench. So if you don't care and you nominate unqualified people left and right, if you nominate 10 unqualified people and 10 times out of those 10, the American Bar Association says, yeah, they're not qualified, that's not because they're biased. That's because you keep sending unqualified people up as nominees, but naturally they don't recognize that. No, being a conspiracy theorist or a ghost hunter or whatever has happened in the first Trump administration. No, that's not unqualified. That's so qualified that it looks like horseshoe theory to you guys who understand the so-called law. Go all the way around the bend, and you don't understand that these people are such super geniuses that they're beyond your comprehension and are in fact so qualified that they go all the way around the spectrum and look unqualified to you. That's your problem. That's actually what they're arguing here. Accordingly, their letter continues, while the ABA is free to comment on judicial nominations along with other activist organizations, there is no justification for treating the ABA differently from such other activist organizations, and the Department of Justice will not do so. And, that never I don't even know what sort of formal arrangement there ever was, although sometimes you get surprised. It's become a part of the infrastructure in a way, and they do mention such a role later on, but what can I tell you? People have gotten used to the idea that lawyers they're a certain type of person, and they have a certain type of loyalty to the legal system, and they have certain, although lots of people think of lawyers as slick and as a bunch of cheaters, they do in fact have a fairly strict ethics code. Lots of people will disagree about whether they're adhering to it, but they do have it, and it will mostly keep the lawyers from just outright lying. It's always been sort of the thing about the profession was that they were always looking for ways to say something in pursuit of their agenda that was at least true enough that you couldn't say, well, they're not lying. They just have a very different perspective on things. But now that the Trump administration and Trump, when he's a party to a lawsuit, simply says, it doesn't matter to me. Go ahead and lie, and you're fired if you don't. Right? They sometimes now you're running into difficulty. Right? The general trustworthiness of the profession made it possible over the decades to say, all right. In fact, if we want an outside organization to vet these judicial nominees, we can't depend on the Republican Party to do it. We can't depend on the Democratic Party to do it because partisanship. We'll look to the outside. We'll look to the American Bar Association because there's Republican lawyers, there's Democratic lawyers, and they all get together in a bar association. They all have a certain process they go through. And it's just a matter of, if you're unqualified for the bench, it's usually because, well, have you ever been a judge? No. Okay, not all people have. Have you ever been a lawyer? Like, if the answer is no, I'm a ghost hunter, right? You say, well, that guy is probably unqualified for it. Or if you are a lawyer and you're like, you have been disciplined by the bar 100 times, or, you've been convicted twice of stealing your client's money, or you very frequently advocate for positions that are ungrounded in reality and get sanctioned by the courts. though you haven't been disbarred, right? Those are the sorts of things that would lead you to say, unqualified for the bench. So what's the issue, right? Normally you just trust the American Bar Association for that. So the Trump administration is saying, we no longer believe that the American Bar Association should be listened to. Well, that's one thing. But what else do they say? Specifically, the Office of Legal Policy will no longer direct nominees to provide waivers allowing the ABA access to non-public information, and this is an interesting bit, including bar records. All right, so without examining that part of that phrase, what they're saying here is normally when a person is nominated to the federal bench and they go through the vetting process in the Senate, etc., they have their nominees sign waivers that will allow the ABA to go over their records and then make some kind of a recommendation. Senators presumably, maybe they do, maybe they don't get access to this non-public information, but it's usually, I guess, digested by the ABA first and can be passed on to the Senate. It may or may not be the case that they're choking off the Senate's access to this stuff, but they're certainly leaving the ABA out of it. Nominees will also not respond to questionnaires prepared by the ABA and will not sit for interviews with the ABA. So they'll do everything they can to make it less likely that the ABA will feel confident enough to issue a rating for the person. I'm sure that at some point, at the outset, they'll keep trying to do it and say, well, we happen to know that they're still unqualified for the bench, even without access to non-public information. We just know who they are. We've seen them practice, and we asked around. They didn't sit for us with an interview, but we heard from others. I guess the belief probably is in the Trump administration that the more frequently they find themselves having to label people not qualified for the bench without the ability to ask the person, what do you have to say for yourself in all this, to cross-examine that person or to get that person's perspective. Republicans inside the American Bar Association apparatus, working on these things will probably start raising a stink and saying, I don't like the idea that we're labeling this person not qualified for the bench when we don't even talk to them. And it's like, well, but they're prohibited by the administration from talking to us. They can't use that as cover for escaping our conclusions about their not being qualified. I mean, you should start with the assumption that you need to prove your qualification for the bench, I guess, and at least in the Trump administration. I'm sure that the presumption used to be otherwise. We assume that anybody nominated to the bench is qualified unless we hear otherwise. But if you won't even sit for an interview, then I guess at some point it'll be fair for the American Bar Association to say, all right, well, the assumption there has to be they're not qualified. There's something they're hiding. That's why they're not speaking to us. And the question is whether or not Republican Bar Association leaders will be able to convince the overall leadership of the American Bar Association that they're no longer in a position to confidently make the call on whether or not people are qualified if they can't talk to the nominees and thereby neuter the American Bar Association's role in vetting judges, and they'll get what they want that way. Anyway, the ABA itself did not respond to a request for comment, although I would love to have heard their comment on the idea that the Office of Legal Policy at the DOJ was going to say, don't sign the waivers anymore, because without the waivers, the Bar Association will not have access to your bar records. And I'm not certain of the logistics of all of this. It may very well be the case that, well, the American Bar Association doesn't keep those records. Local bar associations keep those records. And although they're all affiliated with the American Bar Association, they're not the same entities. So if there's some confidentiality under which the New York City Bar Association holds its bar records and they can't or won't or don't ordinarily share them with the American Bar Association, then without a waiver being signed, then I guess, the vetting committee at the American Bar Association won't have access to that information, although you'd think that they'd build that in. Maybe they need to reform the structure of things at the American Bar Association and say, if you're going to be an affiliate of the American Bar Association and give yourself legitimacy that way, then you're going to have to share your disciplinary records with the ABA so that we can vet federal judges. On the other hand, another way they could work this out is they could say, all right, well, the American Bar Association won't make that recommendation. The bar associations to which this nominee belongs will make that determination because they're the only ones who can look at their own records without these waivers. I think you could probably handle it that way. The White House, as it turns out, took a similar stance during Trump's first term in office, so I'd be curious about how that went there and who dealt with it in which ways. According to Ballotpedia, the ABA rated 264 of Trump's nominees. 187 were rated well qualified. 67 were rated qualified. And 10, which is nothing really to cry about for these guys, were rated not qualified. Though a small figure, that stands in contrast with other recent administrations, which had at most 3 unqualified picks during their time in office, which again just goes to show, for the normal person observing this, you'd say that's odd, but I guess it should be expected that the Trump administration would, at random, nominate more than 3 times more unqualified people than any other administration prior, because other administrations cared and this one doesn't. But, all right, they see it as bias. Dick Durbin, top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, blasted the move as an unjustified and blatantly political move by the Trump administration. I think he's right. This decision overturns a practice that has been in place for nearly 70 years under Republican and Democratic administrations alike in order to provide cover for unqualified and extreme nominees who would crumble under a nonpartisan review by their peers. Durbin wrote in a statement calling it a seismic change. This decision will ultimately ease the confirmation process for Trump nominees who have demonstrated bias against protected classes, don't have the judicial temperament to rule fairly from the bench, or don't have the requisite experience to be confirmed to a lifetime appointment as a federal court judge, negatively impacting generations of Americans. The Trump administration has taken a number of actions targeting the ABA. An executive order from Trump directed Education Secretary Linda McMahon to consider whether to suspend the ABA's role as a law school accreditor. Right? If you are interested in whatever, but for the Trump administration to say, well, we keep losing in court, that's because, principles of law and the actual rules, judicial canons for interpreting law as written are making us lose every time because we keep saying, we think the law means this, and other people are like, no, it's written down right here what the law says. You're completely wrong. Yeah, well, you're just pre-wrong. You don't understand that words have different meanings in our minds, and they should have that same meaning in your minds. But that's insane, what you're saying. Nobody trained in the law thinks that that's the way it should work. All right, well, what if we start our own Trump University Law School? Well, no. Because the American Bar Association won't accredit a law school that simply says whatever Trump says goes as far as law is concerned. Well, what if we don't allow the ABA to be involved in accrediting law schools and we instead come up with the Trump Accrediting Organization that will accredit the Trump University School of Law? Why can't we do that? Well, that's ridiculous. Who the hell are they? I don't know, but the education secretary now says that's fine. Would that work? Maybe. I don't know. We may find out. The organization also sued over the stripping of grant funding that limited its training programs abroad, the ABA's, as well as another at the Justice Department for victims of domestic and sexual violence. The DOJ case, or in that case, the judge found targeting of the ABA violated the group's First Amendment rights, as you might have imagined. The government does not meaningfully contest the merits of the ABA's First Amendment retaliation claim. It points to no deficiencies in the ABA's performance of its grant obligations. Judge Christopher Cooper, a former President Obama nominee, wrote in the opinion. It concedes in fact, that the similar grants administered by other organizations remain in place. It agrees that bringing a lawsuit is protected by the First Amendment, and it suggests no other cause for the cancellation apart from the sentiments expressed by Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche in his memorandum. In other words, cutting off those grants to the ABA was arbitrary and capricious, and so therefore the judge blocked it. Well, what if the judge just doesn't understand the super genius powers of the Trump mind to overcome barriers like the Constitution and 300, 400, 500 years of common law under the English system before our own? Right. I don't know. What if they don't understand it? Well, then how about if we start a new organization that will accredit people who believe that as lawyers, even though they only had to go to law school for 15 minutes. It was an afternoon seminar. You pay $1,000 to the Trump organization and poof, you're a lawyer according to this new organization. Can we do things that way? You can. Don't know if people will notice, but you could try it. Anyway, that's in the offing as well. Something for you to consider in the background. I'll stick with the legal system for just a moment. Something else I wanted to bring up at some point and didn't shoehorn in, but Justice did one of the days last week in the program. This will surprise and dismay some of you, but not those, I guess, in North Carolina, but maybe some of you in North Carolina. Ongoing situation in North Carolina for months was the lawsuit over the Supreme Court election there, with Jefferson Griffin, the Republican candidate, suing to overturn his election loss and keeping this thing wrapped up in court for months. And then finally, we thought we had a finalized outcome and settled the election in favor of the Democratic candidate there. And I've already, in the jumble of other things, lost track of the names, but they'll be here in this one. But believe it or not, they're making a live court case controversy out of this thing all over again. WRAL News reported May 27th, middle of last week. Trump DOJ now is suing. They're suing North Carolina over the election claims similar to Jefferson Griffin's own lawsuit. Griffin lost, of course, so can't you just take your lumps and say, oh, well, it didn't work? No. President Donald Trump's DOJ sued the North Carolina Board of Elections over its voter rolls, echoing some of the same claims that fellow Republican Jefferson Griffin made in his unsuccessful attempt to overturn the results of a 2024 state Supreme Court race. It's not entirely clear whether they think in doing so that they'd be able to reverse the election so much as make trouble for North Carolina in their next election. But let's see. Will Duran reporting here for WRAL. North Carolina has, they claim, failed to comply with federal law requiring accurate voter lists and isn't doing enough to fix those deficiencies, the U.S. Department of Justice alleged in a lawsuit last Tuesday against the North Carolina State Board of Elections. The lawsuit, filed by the administration of Republican President Donald Trump, says the state should have done more to verify the identity of voters in the state to ensure no fraud is occurring. Now, North Carolina has pretty much assured that no fraud occurred there, but they should have done more to assure people like, Donald Trump or Jefferson Griffin, that their idea of fraud wasn't occurring. It specifically homes in on thousands of people from whom the state's database of registered voters doesn't, from whom, it says from whom, probably for whom, the database doesn't include a driver's license number or social security number. I see where people are latching on to things, but doesn't seem to be substantively borne out here. But okay, many of the DOJ's demands are already underway due to previous lawsuits over those voters with missing information, but the lawsuit says the state's efforts to fix the problems haven't been robust enough, right? So somebody said the state really needs to go through these records where they don't have a driver's license number or social security number and make sure that they get them so that those people can, to our way of thinking, be properly vetted as voters. But of course, if you do provide that information, I'm sure you'll come up with something else you don't like. But okay, that's the initial complaint. And the state has said, all right, you're right. Fine. For the sake of argument, we think we will begin that effort. Well, we're going to sue anyway, saying you're not beginning it hard enough. So what's it doing? It seeks to enforce a 30-day deadline for the state to contact all of the voters in question and either get their information or remove them from the list of registered voters. But is 30 days enough? They say yes. Everyone else apparently says no. Actually, you need more time. At minimum. Trump's lawsuit echoes many of the same claims that fellow Republican Jefferson Griffin made in his unsuccessful attempt to overturn the election results from 2024 for a seat on the state Supreme Court that was won by incumbent Democratic Justice Allison Riggs. There's your name. The lawsuit wouldn't be able to undo Riggs's election victory since it has already been formally certified, but it could have ramifications for as many as 250,000 North Carolina voters whose eligibility to vote in the future could be called into question. And they're fine with that. I mean, the Republicans are going to be happy to settle for that, I'm sure. Griffin and Trump have each focused on a state database that's supposed to contain the driver's license number or social security number of all registered voters to prove they are who they say they are. Okay. Such lists are required by federal law, the Help America Vote Act, in fact, or HAVA, which passed in 2002, modernizing voting rules and administration nationwide. That law was the focus of the federal lawsuit filed in the Eastern District of North Carolina, which says the state isn't doing enough to stop voter fraud, even though none was found. Isn't that something? Trump has repeatedly made false claims about voter fraud, including about his loss in the 2020 election, of course, although those claims were thrown out in court by the dozens after the 2020 election. Polls show many Republican voters still lack faith in American elections. The cornerstone of public trust in government lies in free and fair elections, the lawsuit says. Yes, which is why we had those court cases, and you lost them all, which means it actually the cornerstone of public trust for Republicans lies elsewhere, apparently. But the core of the compact between the state and its citizens rests in ensuring that only eligible citizens can vote in elections. Yeah, but you haven't proven that anything else has happened here. And even though you've taken 65 cracks at it, state officials have acknowledged the HAVA issues, but have also said that in many cases, the people whose information appears to be missing actually did provide proof of identity when they registered to vote, and it was simply typed incorrectly into the spreadsheet. They've also previously downplayed the severity of the missing information for voters in the database, saying that everyone who voted in 2024 had to show photo ID to vote, or provide their social security number if they lacked ID. So, I mean, this is a bit of a joke, right? Well, you got to remove these people from the rolls because they haven't given you a driver's license number or social security number. But yes, they have. Yeah, but it's not written down here. Yeah, but that's not what you said. You said they didn't show it, so they should be ineligible. I'm saying they did show it. How do you know they should? Because the law is what you asked for. You said people should have to show a photo ID in order to cast a vote. You know, what if they don't have a photo ID? All right, fine. You said at that point when you were still making concessions. If you give your social security number, that should be enough. All right, fine. So everybody who voted in this contested election of 2024 either showed a photo ID or gave a social security number, just like you said you demand. Yes. So why are you suing to throw them off the voter rolls? Because they haven't left a note behind giving that driver's license number or social security number. Okay, but what's the problem? Because in 2026, when they go to vote again, we're going to ask them again, and they're going to show it. And if they don't show it, they can't vote. Isn't that exactly what you want? It's not exactly what we want. We also want to create this problem because we know you're never going to be able to correct this issue for everyone. And some of these people are going to get thrown off the voter rolls, and we want that. That's all. So that's what this lawsuit is about, as it turns out. The DOJ acknowledged in its new lawsuit on Tuesday that the Elections Board has already begun fixing the issues, but said they could do more, writing that the Elections Board only took limited actions to prevent future violations from reoccurring, which isn't, what else are you asking for? Well, you're not preventing future violations that haven't occurred yet. I know, that's correct. What can we do about that? Sam Hayes, the executive director of the State Elections Board, told WRAL on Tuesday that while he was still reviewing the DOJ lawsuit and the exact details of it, he broadly agreed that there have been problems that need fixing. Hayes is new on the job, having taken over this month after a switch in partisan control at the Elections Board from a Democratic majority to a Republican one. So it may be that Sam Hayes is the guy assigned the task of saying, I don't understand anything, but I'm paid to agree with Trump, so that's what we're going to do. The failure to collect the information required by HAVA has been well documented, Hayes said. Rest assured that I am committed to bringing North Carolina into compliance with federal law. Okay. When's it going to happen? I don't know. What's all at the heart of this? Probably this bit here. We're not going to get through the entirety of the article here before we have to play ourselves out, but this may explain everything. The Trump administration's lawsuit comes amid a separate legal battle in state courts over which political party should control the state elections board. And guess what? I think they want the Republican ones to control it. Now, historically, that power belongs to the governor, Josh Stein, who, guess what? He's a Democrat. So historically, how has North Carolina done it? Control of the Board of Elections goes to the party in control of the governor's mansion, I guess, and that's the Democrat. But we don't want that. We want the opposite. So the Republican-led legislature has passed a new law after Stein won the 2024 election, but before he came into office, giving the elections board to a Republican. Instead, it would be controlled by the state auditor, who happens to be Republican Dave Voliek instead. Isn't that a neat trick? Similar efforts have been ruled unconstitutional in recent years, and Stein has sued over this effort, arguing that this is also unconstitutional because it was before. Republican judges in state courts have so far ruled that the board will remain, for some strange reason, under GOP control while Stein's lawsuit plays out. You might be right, but for the time being, we'll just leave it as it is. Prior to Griffin's lawsuit, a conservative election integrity activist filed HAVA complaints with the North Carolina Board of Elections prior to the 2024 elections. The board's Democratic and Republican members voted unanimously to dismiss her claims. But guess what? They have a renewed interest in them all of a sudden.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
All right. Well, it's really rather remarkable, but I wanted to alert you to the fact that they were starting this nonsense all over again down in North Carolina, and now starting more nonsense all over again. Justice Putnam takes us away to the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next, right here on Netroots Radio, with a gathering, a collection of eclectic stories once again from around the country and around the world. See you tomorrow.